Hello, I'm Michael Marsh. Welcome to the program dedicated to reestablishing our constitutional republic, both here in Oregon and in the United States. On paper, we still have our constitutional republic, but our legislators, both at the state and national level, have been kind of tearing down our system and replacing it with something else. So we have to pay attention to our candidates first and to the bills that they pass. And if you know, you'll probably notice that my set seems a little bit empty today because Camo is no longer with us. So if I cry, it won't be my guest's fault. And speaking of my guest, Jordan Ort, who is bringing together a referendum on one of the bills that was passed in the recent legislature, House Bill 3427. Tell us, Jordan, about, first start off, what is a referendum, and then tell us about what House Bill 3427 does, and then tell us what your referendum part is about.
Certainly. So I just wanted to say first, thank you for having me on your show, and I'm sorry to hear about Camel. I know that she was a big part of your set here and in your life, so my condolences to you on that.
Thank you.
So a referendum in Oregon, in our Constitution, it gives us the power as citizens to bring anything forth on our ballot that we want to have a say in. And so that can be petitions that we put together ourselves to put on the ballot, or once the legislature passes laws and maybe we don't like the whole law or something about it, we have the option to bring forth that whole bill, in this case House Bill 3427, or just parts of that bill. So we can line item veto parts of that. And 3427 is a bill that would direct $2.8 billion to education, and they're calling it the Student Success Bill. Lots of other people are calling it the hidden sales tax. So I guess that kind of shows you what people think about that bill, depending on what they call it. But this referendum that we're bringing to the people, we're gathering signatures right now, would take just one page of that 400-page bill and bring that to the voters. And that piece that we're bringing to the voters specifically talks about the sales tax part of it. So the gross sales tax.
So what is the difference between a gross sales tax and a regular sales tax? What does it mean by saying a gross sales tax? So
the key language here is the gross part of it. So when you're talking about, and in this bill it states that if you make over $1 million, that once you hit that $1 million mark, they're going to tax you 0.57% of your gross sales. So your sales is everything you make before your expenses, before your taxes, before you pay for your employees, anything like that. Your income, however, or your net, is everything after that. So that includes, like I said, your labor costs, your expenses, and taxes. So that's your net. And the problem that we're having with this bill and the concerns that it has for not only businesses, but what's going to be passed on to consumers and us as citizens, is that $1 million in sales is really not a lot, you know, and then you take into account, again, all those expenses that I just talked about earlier. You take all that into account, and suddenly that $1 million, it can go away fairly quickly. So the difference between your gross and your net can be very significant.
Yeah, and so much that goes into running a business. The employees, they got to get paid. That's the first thing, and plus if you have equipment, that has to be paid.
Yes.
So I understand there's 6 sections of the bill that is actually being repealed.
I'm going to just count real quick on my cheat sheet. 7.
7.
So 7 sections.
Okay.
So it all fits neatly on this paper right here. The sections that we're repealing, and so the bill itself directs funds to go to schools, right? $2.8 billion to go to schools over the next biennium, and it also to kind of satisfy some concerns of, well, this is going to increase expenses for the average family, and it's estimated that it will go up at least $600 a year for families. And so to kind of satisfy those people, in there is also an income tax. It's not a credit, but it's like decreasing the percentage on their income taxes for certain brackets. And I apologize, I don't have that specific information, but I know that that's part of it too. So that will stay in there. Money to the schools will also stay in there. The thing that we're concerned about is this piece on how the legislature wants to pay for this money that's going into schools. And so then your next question might be, well, how are we going to pay for this, right? Oregon has seen record-breaking revenues in the last couple of years. We've gone up 40% in our revenue since the recession. We have record-breaking revenues to the point where the kicker is going to come back at $1.4 billion. So Oregon has money. It's just how we're choosing to spend it and where that money is going. And myself and people who are signing this petition are saying, fund our schools, but you need to figure out how to do it with the money that you've already taken from us as taxpayers.
Now, for the schools, Oregon is 48th as far as graduation rate. They have a very poor record.
That's correct.
The educational standards seem to be pretty low here in Oregon. Is there anything in this bill that these taxes are going for, that you're referring to the people, that would improve Oregon's education system, other than just throwing money at what is known problem?
To my knowledge, there isn't. So what you're trying to say is there any tests to see, if the money that we're putting into schools is actually making a difference? And to my knowledge, there is no measurement of that per se. I know that we have increased the school budget over $3 billion in the last 8 years, and we still haven't seen our graduation rates go up in that time, and we're still 48th in the country, and we still have the shortest amount of days. So I would like to see some improvement in that area. I know that we're struggling with class sizes, and I know that it's very frustrating for teachers. I have friends that are teachers, family members that are teachers, and it is not an easy job. I don't envy that sometimes, especially with those large classrooms and children with disabilities and the caseloads that they're having, and teachers walking away from that profession because it is just so stressful. I would like to see that the money that the legislatures and the governor are saying are going into schools. It doesn't seem to me that we keep putting this money into schools, but it's not helping our children. It's not helping those teachers and those staff members. So I don't necessarily put that on the teachers. I think that maybe we need to go a different way about it. Not being a teacher, I don't necessarily know what that looks like. So I'm not going to pretend to know that, but I don't think what we're doing is working.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned that it's a growth tax.
Yes.
Now, so if somebody has a product that they're selling, they sell $1 million worth or $1.2 million, but they also have employees and equipment and all this, and so if a business doesn't actually make any money this year, they still have to pay the tax if they don't make any profit at all, or even if they lose money.
They would still have to pay the tax on anything that's over $1 million. So it wouldn't matter if they made money or not. So they could certainly make less money, or they could be in the negative and they would still owe that tax. And that is, a frustration that a lot of people have. And so this really hurts small business owners when you really look at it, because a company that is making, close, if the closer you are to making $1 million, the more that's going to hurt you. And what incentivizes you to grow as a company? What incentivizes you to add on your employees when you're only going to be able to deduct 35% of your labor or capital costs from that? And so a great example is, from our area, a little bit to the north in Portland, where they passed a tax in the Portland area, and Winco decided that instead of raising their prices on their goods, they were just going to add it straight to the receipt, so that their customers could see, hey, this is the reason that our prices are going up, not because the price of these goods are going up per se, but because Portland passed this tax, and that's where this money's going. And so it's not actually going to Winco or their employees, being an employee-owned business. It's not going to them, it's going to the city. And we're going to see more of that, I'm fairly certain, if this continues to go through, or taxes like this, because we have more coming down the pipeline in terms of more taxes that are coming, and in situations like this. So I could see more businesses trying to be more transparent with their consumers to say, hey, this is where your money's going. It's not going to us.
Yeah. Now you mentioned that low-income people are going to have the tax bracket is going to change, and they're going to individual income taxes isn't going to be quite as high. Now, we do have a homeless problem, and we do have a lack of affordable housing, and it's pretty much a statewide thing.
Certainly.
But here in Salem as well. Now, contractors who are home builders, they want to, let's say they want to build a multi-family home, apartment complex. I could see where that $1 million could go by real quick.
Yeah.
So, are we likely to see more housing or being built, or fewer housing if the bill stays?
So we certainly have a supply issue here in Oregon, and that is, a lot of people who ran for office, that was one of their big things, was to work on our housing crisis here in Oregon. And if you consider, if you're a builder and you're trying to build single-family, multi-family homes, your expenses are going to add up quickly, and you're going to get to that $1 million in gross sales fairly quickly as well. Yeah. One of the things about this bill is that there is a bill that's being heard right now, House Bill 2147, that is, it's everything to correct, not everything, but it's trying to correct some things that happened with 3427, because it was pushed through so quickly. And there were things that they left out, or in this bill they're trying to negotiate with different groups to kind of have some carve-outs. We've been hearing that a lot, the carve-outs that are happening in different industries for different bills that it doesn't affect them. And one of them is the construction industry. And so Intel realized, oh, we want to build a new campus. And so, they're going to be affected greatly by this. $1 million when you're building a whole new, campus for your employees and all your stuff is a drop in the bucket when you're looking at that. So they want some carve-outs. I can easily see how it, like you said, you're going to reach $1 million in gross sales. And then how are you not going to pass that on to your consumers? You're not going to be able to absorb that, especially when you have employees.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to absorb that. That's going to go to the consumers. In fact, with 2147, the automobile industry wants it in the statute that they can automatically pass that on. So that's just going to be another line item when you buy that car that says it's this tax, however they choose to call it. It is a sales tax. We already have a luxury sales tax. To say that we don't have sales tax right now, I mean, that's up for debate, but we already have that, and they already want to put that as a line item. So in industries where they can pass this tax along, they will. One of the industries that you're not going to be able to do that is with the farmers, right? So, when you have a world market for all that stuff, you're not going to be able to mark your prices up and absorb a lot of those costs. And I know that that's where a lot of the frustration with our farming industry is coming into play, on top of cap and trade and anyway, you're going to get into that stuff. But when you consider maybe these things, and that's a thing, is when you're considering these things one at a time, maybe it's not that big of a deal. But when you've already, when we already have our income tax, we already have our property tax, we already have these little things, and what's 50 cents on $1,000 for every $1,000, but it adds up, and you're getting hit at every angle, and soon consumers aren't going to be able to hold this, and then you're going to have businesses that are going to leave Oregon if they haven't already. We've already heard of 660 layoffs from 4 companies, and that's big layoffs that we're hearing. We're not hearing about the ones and the twos. Those don't make the news, right? Yeah. So we know of at least 660 in the last 3 weeks that have happened. That's going to continue happening. Oregon is not going to be a place where people can afford to have their businesses. And as a small business owner, when you're considering your growth, how far are you going to be able to grow? Is it really going to be worth it for you to work so hard only to have to give that away in taxes? Now, do we all want successful schools? Do we all want educated children, educated future? Certainly. We just want we want responsible money management, and we want to see that money being, allocated to our students, but do it with the money that we've already given you.
Yeah. Now, unfortunately, this isn't the only tax coming down from this legislature, is it?
Oh, no. Certainly not.
Yeah.
Certainly not.
Now, you mentioned 7 parts of the bill that are being referred to people. What are some of these items?
So, that made me think of something else. But one of the, so the part about once you reach $1 million, for every dollar spent after that, or excuse me, every dollar that you gross after that will be essentially charged 0.57%. And you will be able to deduct 35% of your labor costs and your capital cost of your expenses. There are exemptions to the law, so gas, groceries, long-term care businesses. There's another one that I can't think of off the top of my head. But there are certain businesses and certain items that are not going to be taxed. In the bill, it also states that once you reach $750,000 in your gross sales, that the state wants you to register with them so they can keep track of your sales. And once you hit that million, then they're going to start taking their money out. So they want to be tracking your sales at that point. That can be kind of concerning to people who really don't want the government, necessarily meddling in their business.
Does it mean they're going to have to create a new bureaucracy, or is this going to be done by an existing bureaucracy?
You know what? I don't know the answer to that question. That's a good question, though, because with that comes a new, expense.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, the money is supposed to go to education to all of a sudden go into this bureaucracy.
Doesn't that happen a lot, though?
Yeah.
Talked a little bit about the different sections, but one thing with the House Bill 2147 that is being heard right now is they want to lower the $1 million gross to $750,000.
Wow.
And that's going to hit a lot more smaller small businesses.
Yeah.
And the reason that they want to do that is because so many other industries, they're trying to give carve-outs for them. So they're giving carve-outs to Intel, they're giving carve-outs to the automobile industry and other industries. And so to make up for that money, now they want to potentially lower that threshold so that it affects more smaller businesses. But who, if you're trying to help people, why are you nickeling and diming those small businesses that, that margin that they're having? And you consider, like I said, to get to $1 million, can be kind of easy peasy, but, your margins are small when you're talking about the food industry.
Yeah.
In certain other industries, like you have a very small margin that you're operating on. And so that can be very costly. We're also, we talked about right before this about minimum wage going up. In certain areas of the state, you pay for a transportation tax that goes on your payroll. And so there's all these again, nickeling and diming to where is it going to be worth it to have a business in Oregon?
And several companies, I understand, have already, shut down and fired most of their people. You mentioned, 600 so far?
I've heard of 660 that we know of. That's 4 businesses. And there are businesses that are deciding to leave Oregon and in finding, starting up shop other places because it is more business friendly.
So basically what this tax does is create more poverty. They're going to have this education, maybe. Maybe they'll have a better education, but they'll definitely no jobs when they
get out of high school. And to that point, there's a lot of, I live in Marion County, there's a big push to focus on the trade positions, and because we're sorely lacking in that area in terms of electricians, HVAC, plumbing, contractors. We're sorely lacking in those blue-collar jobs, if you will. And those are the industries that are packing up and leaving, your manufacturing industry. And living in Marion County, that's, that is going to hit my area, pretty hard in the town that I live in Staten. And so those are certainly concerning things. And like you said, yeah, we're going to have this money for education, but if a business shuts down, you're not getting any money from that business. You're laying off, firing employees that now have no income. So they aren't contributing. They're not only not contributing to society in terms of their income tax and buying goods and things like that, now they're going to be on unemployment.
Yeah.
So you're creating a vicious cycle. And I can see the intent, of course. Like I said, I've said this many times, that we need money for our schools. We need money for education. But this isn't the way to go about it.
Yeah. So they're already spending, what, $3 billion a year on education without any new taxes?
No. So in 2011, I believe it was 5.5 billion, and in the 2017 biennium, it was about 8.3 billion.
Okay.
So we've raised the money that we've been putting into schools. And I think that's where the frustration comes as well. Is we've raised the amount of money budgeted for schools, but we're not seeing smaller school sizes. We're not seeing the reprieve for our teachers and putting that money into the classrooms. And so another concern for me as a citizen paying, these taxes, but then also as a mother, where's that money going to go? Oh, also, so the money isn't in a constitutionally protected, that's a big thing, right? So it's not in a constitutionally protected account. And forgive me if I'm not saying that right. But we are setting that money aside. But at any time, any future legislature could come along and say, okay, well, we want this money for something else. And it's not protected just to go to schools. And so they could decide that it's going to go somewhere else. And that's a big issue right now. And no one will come right out and say it, but a lot of news agencies are coming out and saying, that money is going to go into PERS. It's not going to go into our schools. And so that's a frustrating thing too, is if you're going to fund PERS, then come out and say that. But if you're going to use the excuse that this money is going to our children, and that if you don't agree with this, then you don't agree with educating children, that's not fair to say about anybody, right? And so that is another frustrating point, is that it's misleading, and it's not clear to us what is actually happening with that money.
And you mentioned there's some carve-out, some businesses, industries will be cleared, but most small businesses and most farms will be still having to pay this tax.
Yeah, they're going to be impacted by it.
So, personally, I like to eat. That's just me.
I like to eat too.
Yeah, so there maybe Democrats, and this is mostly Democrats that are pushing this, do they believe that food grows in the grocery store? It just magically appears?
I can't really speak for other people. I mean, that is certainly a question. Where do you think your food comes from?
Yeah.
And how long do you think we're going to be able to sustain that is certainly a concern.
Yeah, because, I do worry about, like I said, I like to eat. And if it makes more difficult, any bill that makes it more difficult for farmers to do their job, I have a concern. And, just for very practical, selfish reasons. Okay, we've got a little over 50 seconds. Anything you want to say that you haven't already said?
Just that if you believe that education should be funded, but with the money that we have already given in our taxes, then please sign our petition. You can go to watchdog.com. You can also, my email is on the screen, and so if you have any questions, you can also email me there. And we need to get petitions signed, so we have 90 days after the session ends, which it's looking like June 21st might be that date. So we have 90 days to get the signatures that we need. So if you're interested in having those petitions, email me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jordan, and I wish you very much luck in getting those signatures.
Thank you.